Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balkowitz. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday, and this is number 8 in the series, 12 reasons you might struggle to get well and what to do about it. So this is number 8, and number 8 is assuming you've had every possible test done. This happens a lot when I'm talking to people, reviewing their case history and their labs and their signs and symptoms. You start looking at the blood work they've had done, and this is something, somebody will say, listen, I've had every possible test done. I've had every possible test done. Especially at the start, I'd like to see a good comprehensive blood chemistry panel, and I don't care what condition you have. Thyroid, adrenal, gut issues, I think a good place to start is a good comprehensive blood chemistry panel to get a 30,000 foot view of what's going on with somebody's physiology. And even that means different things to different people. When I started out in blood chemistry, 30 plus years ago, a comprehensive blood chemistry panel was about 40 some tests. And now you said, if somebody said, hey, my doctor ran an allopathic physician ran a comprehensive blood chemistry panel, it may be 14 to 18 tests. So what gets measured does get managed, and if you don't measure it, you don't have to manage it, but you also can't see what's going on. So we need to really do a good job of looking at the physiology. So for the person who's not really in this world, they might assume that because there was a lot of blood drawn, there was a lot of vials, that a lot of vials means they had a lot of different tests done. And that's not always the case. Different tests require different tubes of blood, some need to be whole blood, some need to be serum, some need to be just plasma. So there's different tubes, but lots of different tubes might mean if you had 5 different tubes, it doesn't mean that you've had, I've had 20 tests. It may mean just 5 different tests, but each test needed a different tube. So the number of tubes doesn't always correlate that you've had a really extensive panel done. But one tube, depending on what's going on, you could get maybe 20 tests from one tube. But if you had 8 tubes, maybe those were for 8 individual different tests. So one tube, sometimes you can get a lot of tests done. So number of tubes doesn't always equate to real extensive testing, okay? So sometimes people think that because they've been tested frequently, that they've had really extensive panels done. Typically they haven't. Usually what we see when we start looking at their health history is that the person had the same 5-10 tests done over and over and over again because somebody's either that's all they feel comfortable running or that's all they're trying to assess and manage. And while you may have gone for blood work every month and it seems like I must have had every test done, you probably just had the same test done over and over again. But that doesn't mean that your doctor ran real extensive testing. What we have to keep in mind is that all of us, all physicians, have biases and ignorances. So you could go to 2 different physicians and both could say, I ran a comprehensive panel, and those panels are totally different because of our biases, because of our ignorances. Sometimes people don't know what a test means, so they don't run it. So as physicians, we run tests based on what we were taught. We run tests on what we know, right? We run tests on what we feel comfortable testing because ultimately we're responsible for those results and what to do about those results. If somebody's in an insurance-based model, we may only run the tests that an insurance company dictates that we can run. And and sometimes people make decisions on what to run based on guidelines. And so it might seem like a lot of tests done, but it may not be. And you might say, well, why wouldn't everybody run the same tests, right? If a comprehensive panel is a comprehensive panel, shouldn't it be the same for everybody? No, because everybody has different definitions of what that actually means based on their biases and their ignorances, okay? Now, here's a good example. In a thyroid assessment, if you went to an allopathic physician and asked for a comprehensive assessment of your thyroid physiology, they're probably going to run a TSH with a reflex to free T4. And people get frustrated because they see those tests, they don't feel good, then they listen to a podcast or a blog or a post like this and say, well, he's talking about there's more tests, T3 and free T3 and reverse T3 and thyroid antibodies. And so they get frustrated. But that allopathic medical doctor, whether a GP or an endocrinologist, is doing what they've been taught, what they know, what they're comfortable with, what the insurance dictates, and what the guidelines recommend. So to ask them to do more doesn't make a lot of sense. You can be frustrated, but it's probably not going to change. If you went to a functional or an integrated physician with an allopathic mindset, and ask for a comprehensive thyroid assessment, they may run what we might consider a more complete thyroid panel: TSH, total T4, total T3, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, T3 uptake, thyroid antibodies, right? But oftentimes we don't. Sometimes what we see from a allopathically thinking functional or integrated physician, that they run more thyroid values, but maybe not what somebody like me might consider complete. They may only run TSH, free T3, free T4, maybe thyroid antibodies. And are they wrong? No, they're working with their bias. They may be a physician who says, hey, I need to look at TSH, free T4, and free T3, because if their free T3 is low, then I know I want to give them not just free T4 medication, but I want to give them T3 medication as well, okay? And then the other thing that can happen is you can go to what I consider a true functional medicine practitioner and say, hey, I want to have my thyroid physiology assessed. And in that situation, we're going to run a more complete thyroid panel. And my more complete thyroid panel is TSH and total T4 and total T3 and free T4 and T3 uptake, thyroid antibodies, reverse T3. Like, we want to do everything that's there that's available. And in fact, I'd prefer if there was some other tests that were available, but they aren't. But not only, if you're doing functional medicine, in my opinion, if you're doing functional medicine appropriately, and somebody's coming to me with a thyroid condition, I can't just look at their thyroid panel, because I need to find out, do they have a glandular thyroid problem? Do they have a tissue hypothyroidism, right? Are they on medication, and is it getting converted appropriately? Or are they not on medication, no diagnosis of hypothyroidism, but they do have indications of tissue resistance or tissue hypothyroidism going on? And then not only do I want to do that, but I also wanted to look at, do I have tissue indicators that might indicate that tissues are struggling with low thyroid physiology? And so we can look at the rest of the blood work for blood sugar markers, adrenal markers, lipid values, right? So we can look at the rest of a comprehensive blood chemistry panel to find out, is there inflammation that might be indicate that the person's got this cell stress response going on that's going to create the downregulation of T4 to T3 at the cell level? Do they have immune inflammatory processes going on that would trigger or result in the thyroiditis, the damage of the gland, and the glandular hypothyroidism going on? Do they have tissues that we can see that are really struggling due to a low T3 state? Are they insulin resistant? Do they have high cholesterol? Do they have markers of hypoadrenal function, right? Looking at the rest of the panel helps us get a picture. So assuming you've had every possible test run, you probably haven't, but if you're seeing the same clinician over and over and over again, you're getting the tests that clinician runs because of what he was taught, what he knows, what he feels comfortable with, or what insurance dictates to her, or what her guidelines recommend, right? So it can change, but oftentimes I'll look at somebody's labs, they think they've had real extensive tests done, and they really haven't. Okay. Now, does that mean that more tests, well, just run everything, right? Just nonstop amount of tests? No, more tests doesn't mean that you've had a better assessment done necessarily, right? Sometimes you can run tests that really have no real value, and so therefore they may not be needed. But how are you going to know that? You may not, okay? But if you're going to this, if you look at your labs and it's the same 8 or 10 tests or 2 or 3 tests run over and over and over again, you probably need to get another opinion. So what to do? To consider the fact, am I working with someone who's allopathically oriented or somebody who's more functionally medically oriented? What might be the doctor's bias or ignorance? Going back to, why are they only doing what they're doing? And you might want to consider another opinion. Hope this helps. Put any questions below wherever you watch the video. All right, take care.